weird in gray.
You're perfectly visible.
Okay, good.
Your dog's name is Jane, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I just read over your consultation form. Seems like a resource guarding issue. There's a resource guarding issue, and she's just kind of nervy.
Yeah, I think it's more like she's anxious. The resource guarding issue really only happened that one time. I've never seen her, like, she shares toys. The other family members that I have that have dogs all have little dogs, and she is like, submissive to them. She, if they want their toys, it was just what I didn't see what happened. No one did, but what I think happened is because she doesn't like it sometimes when you come up behind her. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really what it was, more than the resource guarding.
Okay. And how when she was there punctures? Was it like a nip, or what was the severity?
Yeah, so it was just, we didn't see it happen. We just heard the little dog like yelp, and then but she's old, and and then when my brother-in-law went to go take the little dog out, noticed that she had like a red dot. So it was just like one little puncture where she was bleeding on the top of her head.
On top of her head?
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. What else about Jane here?
So really, like, I've been thinking about how to get her back into training during all of COVID, because since this has, we've been in lockdown, I work from home now. She still goes to daycare every day, and she's gone pretty much most of the day. But she it seems to me that she's a little bit more anxious than normal, where like, she's not relaxing. She's watching me at every moment. If I get up, she's like jumping up, like, what's going to happen? Where are you going? What's happening? And then this also thing about people coming up from, to her behind, that's a new thing. She never did that before, before we've been in COVID. And so what happens is, and it's not all the time, like, I'm sure if I patted her behind now, she'd be fine. But sometimes she will do like a low rumble growl, like she doesn't like it. Mm-hmm. And I have a 1-year-old nephew who will sometimes walk behind her, or, will sometimes pat her behind. Sometimes she's fine, sometimes she's not. And I just don't want her fighting him. Like, I don't want it to escalate.
How long have you had her for?
Like 2 years.
Okay. Yeah. And pre-COVID, none of this was ever an issue.
No. Okay. She's always been like a very energetic dog. Like other behavioral things that I've been trying to break since I've gotten her is like greeting people. She's like all over the place, that sort of stuff. But those were really it. Just like her energy and manners.
So when you first got her, you never noticed like whether or not she was kind of skitty, or like maybe she was timid or anything like that? She was just an overexcited, like very friendly dog?
Yeah, really overexcited, really friendly.
Once COVID hit, what did like, for instance, for some people, like they would have someone guest over like, a couple times a week, and then once COVID hit, it was like nobody for months. Was that similar to you, or did you have like close ones still kind of coming over and visiting or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been less, but I'm really close with my family, and we've all maintained us as a bubble. Everybody lives a couple blocks from each other, which is nice. So she still sees like my immediate family.
Okay, so during this time, was she seeing your nephew regularly?
I I think maybe when it first hit, maybe we, like for a month, we didn't see anyone, but after that, yeah, she was seeing him like every weekend.
Has she seen other children ever?
Um, my brother-in-law's sister just moved to Chicago, so now recently she started to see Quinn, who's a little bit younger than my nephew, but that's recent. And
Okay.
I can't think of any other, I mean, no, I don't think
Like
she's ever seen any other children before.
even pre-COVID, not really been around kids.
I don't think so. No, not that I can think of.
Okay. And then with your nephew, on occasion she's okay, and other times she's like, "Don't touch my rear end."
Yeah, or don't walk behind me.
Sure. What's your nephew's energy like? Is he like, like a typical rambunctious kind of loud kid? Is he a quiet kid? Is he a calm kid, excited kid?
So he's one, but he's as much as like a rambunctious 1-year-old can be, he's playful, he moves around, but he's not wild. He
When,
can't walk that that fast.
when he pets Jane, uh, is he verbalizing? Is he quiet? Like, is he like smacking?
No, he's like watching an adult and like smiling, because my sister also has a dog, so we're like, be gentle, and so he does like little pats.
Gotcha. Anything else about Jane I should know?
Yeah, the other thing that it's gotten so much better that since when I first adopted her, but she still is a little destructive, and she targets mostly like pillows and blankets. So it's never been like furniture or anything like that. It's like pillows and blankets and towels. She'll destroy
Is this when you're gone or is this when you're around?
both.
Okay. Um, anything else?
So like just the jumping, I think I sort of taught when people come in, but yeah, that's it.
Okay. And then you did previous training when you got her from Pause, and then you did some work with Found.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. And did you use like a prong collar with Found or
Yeah, it was like a plastic prong collar.
a star, the blue one?
It was black.
Black? Okay, maybe it's a different design now. Any e-collar or just the plastic?
No, just the plastic.
Okay. And what did you use that for? How did you apply it?
Mostly on walks, to make her not pull me, so we
Okay.
could walk. Yeah.
What did they have you do to teach her not to pull you?
That if she started to, I would just do a gentle tug.
Okay.
Right?
Did it work?
Yeah.
It did?
For the most
Okay.
part, yeah.
I'll have to see. Because most people's
Yeah.
perception of what leash walking in his mind is very, very different.
Yeah.
Is it like the triangle tips?
I think so. I don't have it anymore because she went to a daycare that I did not like, and they like destroyed the collar.
Sure. Sorry, one moment.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot I had a phone in here. All right.
That's okay.
Okay, so she's going to daycare and
Yeah, so I don't have the collar anymore, so I don't really remember exactly what it looks like.
okay. So now what do you walk her on?
Just a regular collar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last thing is, how did you come across us?
I was just Googling, just
Okay,
looking for trainers.
sure. All right, so anything else?
I guess one final thing would be, I don't trust her off leash. And so it'd be great if I could do that. And that was one
Sure.
thing that drew me to the e-collar and your method.
Okay, so I'll go over all that stuff. This is good information. So COVID has flipped everything on its head, right? Including just the whole, how you would describe this as people's dogs' temperaments.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of dogs right now are dealing with or developing separation anxiety because the owner is working from home. They can't get away from the dog, right? Or they're doing the wrong thing, because most people think, oh, I'm be home with my dog all day. Like, this is amazing. And then they try to leave after like a month of quarantine. The dog's like going nuts. So that's like the most common one. The other one is with people not really coming over or having guests regularly anymore. It's made dogs, given dogs of a more heightened territorial sense. So I got like a client whose dog was completely friendly, like loved everybody that came over. His biggest problem was that he was just too excited when people came over. And then COVID hit and they didn't have guests for like, a few months or whatever. And then when they finally started to have family over, now he was like growling at all the people that he used to jump on, getting very defensive over the home, things like that. And I told him it's, because for months it changed what his norm was. In your case, I think there is a tie-in, because if you had that dog for going on 2 years now, and COVID just hit like what, 6-8 months ago. So for a year and at least a half, your dog didn't display these issues, and all of a sudden they started cropping up. I think that's a pretty solid like guess there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of feel, because you described the behavior as anxious. Is that correct?
Yeah.
What makes you think it's anxiety based?
Well, she's all like, if I leave, so sometimes I'll see my dad, and I'll keep Jane with my dad if I want to go run to the grocery store or something. She cries the whole time I'm not there.
Okay.
And when I come in, she's like all over me, so I think there's like a little bit of anxious. The energy just feels like she's, not relaxing. She's just waiting for me to do something.
Okay. So that I would describe as an anxious behavior, but I don't find that to be related to the other issues, like the whole, when like possibly like the resource guarding with the other dog. That's more so separation anxiety.
Yeah.
Okay. Which did she have that? Was that even prior to COVID, or is that something that just started happening due to COVID?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of always been that way, but I feel like it's more extreme.
Yeah. Okay. So that's more what I would call separation anxiety. Okay. I think you have a nervous dog. Okay. With some of the things that you were describing in terms of her behavior. With the resource guarding, there's a few variables there. I have to say that yours is incorrect. It's definitely a variable. When you said like the assumption is she had the bone, the dog walked behind her and spooked her, right? That may very well be what it may have been. It could also be because people tend to. It's interesting with dogs. They tend to kind of classify their dog on everything they've not seen or they've seen. So I've always seen my dog to be a very friendly dog, right? And they go, my dog is a friendly dog. And then the dog has an aggressive response. And then their brain can't compute it because they're thinking my dog is a friendly dog. Why would it just be aggressive? Right? Because, so it's like with the human, like right now, you may not think of me as a mean and angry person, right? Because you're not seeing that side of me. And if you did training with me, you would say like, oh, Jesse, like he's very professional, he's very punctual, and he explains things very thoroughly and all that stuff. But you couldn't really speak on the fact of like, oh, he never gets mad.
Right.
you don't see me the other 99.9% of the time, right?
Mhm.
So for humans, like, we wouldn't believe that if someone said like, "Oh, I never get mad." We're like, I don't. In 30 years, you've never been mad,
Mhm.
you know? But for dogs, for some reason, people tend to do that, right? My dog's not an aggressive dog. My dog is always friendly because they've either not seen it yet or they're going by just only what they've seen. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So there's a few variables here. Now, I don't know what the solid answer is. I'm just kind of giving you the spectrum of, yes, I think what you said is a variable. It's a potential. It
Mhm.
could also be um, she had something of a higher value that was
Mhm.
more so worth guarding within that moment. How long ago was that bite, by the way?
It was over Thanksgiving.
So recently.
Yeah.
That can just be an escalation of behavior.
Yeah.
So like if you had seen that behavior a year ago and then it's been a year since, I would say, okay, it's kind of like and maybe that you've been in that context several times since with
Mhm.
no issue. Then I start to think like potentially just caught off guard, what you
Right.
said, or like a fluke moment. Like these things can kind of happen, and I just kind of flag it and like file it away just to be aware. um, but that can also be another variable, right? It's just now her behaviors are starting to escalate, because that can happen as well. Okay.
Mhm.
So when it comes to like things like that, with resource guarding, um, there's a couple of ways of going about it. One is just being mindful, where it's like if she has an object, let's say another bone, and she were to be like near that dog again, like I would have it in a very controlled context, just to like be a step ahead.
Mhm.
Okay, because people like to have how I don't want to say the control.
Oh, you froze.
Dog in the context and not worry about is something going to happen, and just kind of let it be.
Mhm.
Whereas I go, you know what? If I've already seen this once, I don't want to see it again because it sounded like it's an old small dog. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So then, like, let's say in my opinion, if I were to be in that context again, I'd have her like, for instance, on a dog bed where she's not going to move, where I can see her and she can only have the object there. So this way, if I see the old dog approaching, I can just preemptively address that and not worry about any interaction.
Sure.
That makes sense?
Yep.
So it's kind of like kids and dogs. Unfortunately, in my career, a lot of times when people have had called me with uh, dogs that have bitten their child, they were not in the room.
Mhm.
It happens a lot. And I'll tell
Mhm.
them that's on you as an adult,
Mhm.
because you never leave. I don't care if you have a golden retriever who's the friendliest dog in the world. You never leave a child unattended with the dog.
Mhm.
But that's, people get too comfortable.
Right.
Okay. And again, and these are people that are like, I've never seen my dog get aggressive. I've had my dog for 5 years and then it bit my kid in the room.
Mhm.
Right. So there's a lot of variables there. So that's just my personal take on it. And I, of course, educate dog owners and I go, this is how we prevent it. This is how we control it. And then this is like just the other options that you have, because life's not going to allow you to have a very black and white approach.
Right.
You're going to have options, and know how to like just kind of think within the moment. So that's why I always try to stress the resource guarding. To me, is of course like, it seems like the least of your worries here,
Mhm.
just because it hasn't happened too much. And then if it is something that's starting to happen, you're already catching it kind of early on in the process. Okay.
Yeah.
um the child, and the behind thing is where I pick up nervousness.
Mhm.
Okay. It could be, um, it doesn't seem like she has formal structure. Like, you have structure in the sense of she goes to daycare on a regular basis, but daycare is typically just a lot of just nonsense and like playing and stuff,
Mhm.
which puts dogs in an overstimulated state of mind. And then
Mhm.
you mentioned that she's like super jumpy. Is that correct?
Yeah.
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 So overstimulation uh, can look like excitement, and what people tend to interpret as happy.
Mhm.
Okay. but it's not. It's overstimulation, excitement, okay, which is unhealthy when practiced too much.
Mm-hmm.
Because the brain has like a hard time or the inability to turn off. So what happens is the brain's constantly going, and then something happens that the dog doesn't like, and then the trigger. Okay. So like I've had a handful of cases in the past year that people thought were aggressive, because whenever someone would try to pet them, they would nip at them. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I came in, I said, your dog is not aggressive. I'm like, your dog is overstimulated, and the overstimulation creates frustration because the dog does not know where to put it. Okay. So then when the person comes in to pet the dog, they're adding even more stimulation. And then the dog bites in response, because that's how they alleviate frustration. Okay. They use their mouths. So they lick, they chew, they bark, they bite, they salivate. A lot of it is just mouth based. Okay. So as soon as we add discipline and settle the brain, all those behaviors go away. Okay, because the dog was never aggressive in the first place. The dog was just so kind of like wound up.
Yeah.
And there's like, I need somewhere to put this. And then you add in another stimuli, the dog goes, too much. And then it's going to direct to the closest thing, which is the person's hand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I see that stuff all the time. It just happened yesterday at my, here at my facility. We have a board and train, and the owner came to do a follow-up lesson, and the dog was very excited to see her because it's never left her.
Mm-hmm.
And then when she went to pet him, he went and just full on put his mouth on her. And it wasn't that he wanted to be aggressive. It's just all that frustration, all that anxiety, all that just stimulation had to go somewhere, and it happened to be her hand.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what's happening is there might be just a little bit too much stimulation here, and that's what's causing her to do that nervous response. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to to your nephew, I always like to err on the side of caution. Okay. So I'm not a big fan of him approaching her from like, any. If we know the rear is a problem area, definitely trying to steer them away from that.
Yeah.
Because once something happens, it's almost always just too late.
Yeah.
In my experience, right? Like it's like, oh, she bit him. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
no like, what I mean? But I mean, there's no in between.
Right.
So we would just put more rules on your nephew when he can approach her and stuff like that. I would show you a very specific and controlled exercise for introducing children to dogs, which I want you to just kind of take this as information, is that children will treat other dogs the way they treat their own dog.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if his parents are teaching him, because I believe you said they have their own dog as well, right?
Yeah. They have the really old dog.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. So then I always tell my clients, teach your child to ask for permission to pet your own dog.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they're always like, they're like, why? That's kind of weird. I'm like, because your child will apply what they learn with your dog to other dogs.
Mm-hmm.
So if he just runs up to a little dog whenever he wants, which I doubt, because it seems like, so if it's an old dog, I'm assuming they're teaching him, you got to be gentle with the old dog, right?
Yeah.
But, in most cases, if people have a puppy, especially a puppy or a younger dog that's always been friendly, the kid's just sleeping on them, cuddling with them and stuff, which looks cute and nice on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens is they go to their friend's house. Their friend has a dog. And maybe that dog isn't, is fine with their kids, but not other kids. And I've had I've had people's children be bitten by other dogs because they took the same liberties they took with their dog, with that dog.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, but I would go over that with you, just to be cautious, just because he's such a young child.
Yeah.
Okay. The jumping is actually the easiest thing to address. So I'm not worried about the jumping. You see here, the destructive behavior, overstimulation, especially if it happens when you're there.
Yeah.
Okay. That's why I was like, is this happening when you're gone or when you're there? And if you said when I'm gone, separation anxiety, right? If it happens while you're there, overstimulation, inability to shut off has to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The off-leash training, easy, as long as you do your homework. Okay. The trickiest part here is really just that nervous response. Okay. I'm pretty sure it's just, you know, her inability to turn off, and then she's getting caught off guard, and it's causing that response. So my theory is, with the discipline of training, it should help settle and calm her, that the destructive behavior goes away.
Mm-hmm.
The nervous response goes away. The jumpiness is can be a little of both. Most likely will have to be corrected itself, which is easy. The separation anxiety. So like, let's say you left her alone unattended, like what would you see?
She will just be, sometimes and all of these behaviors, they don't happen every time. So sometimes when I leave her alone, and if, you know, I'll come back and my family will tell me that she like waited by the door the whole time whining. Other times, like she's happy to be with them, and then she's just still really overexcited when I come back. If she's just at my place, sometimes I find she has destroyed something when I come home, or she has like, you know, a pillow is out, you know, she's moved it because she was playing with it. It's not destroyed, but she was playing with it, you know. Um, or she'll just bark sometimes, but that's not a huge problem.
Are you in a standalone or like an apartment condo?
Yeah, I'm in an apartment. There's one, I'm on the top floor, and then there's one unit below me, and then,
Okay.
you know, there's a unit across.
Okay, and they've never complained?
No.
Okay.
They have little kids that make lots of noise too. So it's like a mutual understanding.
Yeah. Okay. So the inconsistency of her anxiety when you're gone, when she's with someone, overstimulation. Okay. The inconsistency of even just her anxiety with you being gone also seems like just overstimulation. Because separation anxiety is fairly consistent. Okay. If they have a problem with you leaving, they have a problem with you leaving. Okay. So I think that's the culprit for all your issues here is overstimulation, more of that, a little bit of nervousness. Okay. Anxiety can also stem from overstimulation, because anxiety snowballs. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So like for most people, they leave the home, the dog starts pawing at the kennel, then it starts like whining, then it starts like pushing harder, then it's barking, then it's howling, like it just starts to escalate. And overstimulation and anxiety are also very common to see together, because again, it's the brain's inability to just turn off. So like anxious people can like worry a lot or like overthink things, right? They don't know how to just cap themselves and go like, this is nonsense, that's not going to happen or whatever, you know? So I think that's what your culprit is here. So any questions for me?
No.
So what's going to determine the length of time and the cost is just simply how much you're trying to get done. Okay. The way I operate is I'll give you some options, and then I'll tell you like what we can expect realistically with each option. Okay. Obviously, the more you want to cover, the longer it's going to take. And then I'll explain e-collar as well.
Okay.
So in your particular case, so I have 3, 6, 9, and 12 week or 12 lesson programs. You're in the 6 to 12 range. Okay. The three class 1 is more so for people whose dogs have reactivity, and all they care about is stopping the reactivity. Okay. So like, let's say you did 6 classes. The way I approach it is I look at everything here, and I look at it and I go, okay, this is the important stuff. This is the stuff we definitely want to nip in the bud, because we don't want that becoming a problem. Okay. So like if you did the 6 class program, what I would push for is So the first couple classes was definitely be heel. In your case, and in most cases, the first thing I always cover is leash walking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Proper leash walking, and I have a very strict style of training. So if I take one step, the dog takes one step, I take 5 steps, the dog takes 5 steps. When I stop, they automatically sit. I don't care what the setting is. I don't care if we're at PetSmart or Petco. I don't care if you're at Oz Park in the middle of summer where everybody's running around with their dogs. You know, wherever. I want that level of obedience. Okay. The reason why it's so important is one, it teaches dogs how to turn off. Okay. It teaches them how to settle that brain and chill. Gives them something to focus on outside of the environment, because most dogs are just environment tuned,
Mm-hmm.
right? That the owner, they're completely ignoring the owner. And the way I want it is a dog to be tuned into the owner and ignoring the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have that level of focus, it helps dogs just learn how to turn that brain off and just relax. It also fixes like 70% of problems. So a lot of time, you know, like cases like yours are very common, where it seems like a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, nope, it's really just like a bunch of stuff related to one thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I said there's separation anxiety for the most part, the jumping, the potentially the kind of whipping around when being approached from behind, and the destructiveness. 4 things are all overstimulation related.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the theory is once we kick in with discipline and teaching her how to just shut down and just chill using formal discipline, these things just go away on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Whereas most people tend to think like we have to target the behavior itself, which is not wrong, but it's just not my first thing.
Sure.
Okay. So like I actually had like 5 or 6 puppies over the summer. And during their consultations, because I was at Oz Park, they were just all over the place, right? We did one class, and then the second class, calm.
Mm-hmm.
And the owner's like, stop chewing sticks, stop digging, stop trying to go all over the place, stop barking. And I'm like, yeah, because it was a frustrated puppy that had no discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's what I pick up here. So we do 2 classes on the heel. That should fix, you know, if everything's working as planned, 4 of those things. Okay. The next thing I most likely go over is just teaching you how to appropriately and correctly introduce Jane to like your nephew, and teaching your nephew good introduction skills.
Mm-hmm.
Always supervised, just to be cautious. Okay. We would have to keep an eye on her behavior with like people walking behind her and stuff, because the only way to tell if what we're doing is working is to see that. Okay.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, if like you end up not socializing her for like during the time of training, like we're not going to know any of that stuff. So like I would tell you, like if possible, please like put yourself in these situations, because that's the only way to know. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If all that is going well, you know, like let's say for whatever reason, maybe she's still being destructive. Okay. We would cover correcting behaviors you don't want, like destructive behaviors, chewing on stuff. That's
Mm-hmm.
typically a class, because once you understand behavior, it's simple, because you just want to stop something. Okay. You're not trying to teach something. Teaching something like, you know, sit, stay, you know, walk at my side, that's something that dogs are not meant to do. Okay. They're not, it's not in their genetic code to do those things. So we have to teach them what to do and how to do it in response to a word. Okay. That takes time. But when it comes to don't do something, it's simply apply an aversive. Okay. So like growing up, I was raised old school. I was spanked. So if I talk back to my mom, if I stayed out too late, or if I didn't ask permission to go to my friend's house and I just went on my own, it was just spank, spank, spank.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So one consequence for a multitude of behaviors. So like if she's chewing on stuff, I just teach you how to correct her in a manner that she will understand to deter the behavior. Okay. Positive reinforcement or food-based training doesn't work here because it's for stuff that you want to see again.
Right.
Okay. And then people think, well, if my dog is jumping and they stop jumping and I reward them when they stop, they're going to opt for that. And I go, no. Dogs don't think that's too complex. It's I do this consequence. So I'm not going to do that. as opposed to, oh, if I do this, this is a lot of fun when I jump on people, but if I put my butt in the ground, I get a treat. It's just too, they don't decipher that. Okay. It's going to be very simple. So once you understand that concept, it's really just, you start applying it to things you don't want. We have to keep an eye on the separation anxiety. It's possible, you know, again, if it's what I think and it's overstimulation related, it'll just start to go away on its own. Okay. If we see it lingering and it's something that you want to address, you know, we may incorporate a bar collar to help just keep her passive. Because the presence of the collar just like kind of the dog knows like I can't escalate because there's going to be a consequence. So it just keeps them chill. Whether or not she progresses past the bar collar is another conversation. Okay, because there's no guarantees with animals. Worst case scenario would be if you wanted to address that, she'd have the bar collar, and when you leave, she just has a bar collar. That's all it means. That's worst case scenario. Best case scenario is she has it for a couple of months, and then you remove it, and then you notice that with everything that you've done and that you're continually doing, she doesn't need it anymore. Okay, but every case is different. I don't know. It just depends on how it works out. And then the last couple of classes, we could either cover recall, which is like the next most important thing, or if there's something else you want to cover, like maybe the resource guarding, which I don't really feel she has it. That's something we could go over within that time frame too. Okay, because behavior is always more important than obedience, but you have to have the heal. That has to happen regardless of what you do. Okay. The 9-week program will allow us to get all that stuff done and just a bit more obedience. The 12-week program is everything, plus we push for off-leash level obedience. Okay. Now the variables are her behavior. This seems pretty straightforward that I don't think it's going to be a problem. But like, let's say, I don't know, like maybe the nephew thing, it takes 3 classes instead of 1 for whatever reason. Okay. Now we've used 3 out of 12 classes. Is by the time we hit the end of that program, we may not have covered everything. But then I just ask you, like, well, how do you, I know you wanted off leash, but we spent more time on this than we expected. Are you happy with what you have? Or do you want to like buy a few more classes to get that whole like off leash level of control? You know, and if you're like, no, I'm happy. Like, this is great. Like, I'm very satisfied with what I have. Then I go, great. Thank you for the opportunity. Otherwise, if you go, no, I would like to like, you know, wrap up, and I'll tell you like, you just need 2 more classes. You just need, you know, 3 more classes, whatever. And then Maria would send you an invoice, and then we would just wrap up with that. Okay. Questions about any of this stuff so far?
No, makes sense.
Are you familiar with the e-collar?
I've never used one before, but I looked it up a little bit when I saw it on your website.
So e-collar, in my opinion, is the best and most effective tool. Okay. And there's different methods of training. We have positive reinforcement with the no-pull harness or the gentle leaders. We have choke chains or slip chains. We have pinch collars. We have e-collars and like everything in between, right? Food or positive reinforcement has the lowest ceiling or has the lowest percentage of success. Okay, the absolute lowest. Prong collar, better, but you're limited. The drawbacks are if your dog is maybe too physically tough, that even when you correct your dog with a prong collar, it doesn't really register, right? And I've had people like really just like harshly correct their dogs. The dog does not care. Or when you remove the leash, you no longer have control. Right. With e-collar, right off the bat, you get off leash control. Okay. It has the highest level of success as long as the owner is doing their homework. It's the only tool that can guarantee off leash reliability, because even if your dog decided to not listen, you can make them listen because you don't need to have a leash on them. It also, when it comes to behavior work, is the most effective because I can do a lot of things without even creating confrontation. So if I get a dog that resource guards, which I have a case that I just did right now, most people think, you know, they like grab the bone or go for the bone and let the dog start growling at them. And that's when they're going to punish them. And they go, no, like that's a good way to get bit. I don't need to even do that. I could be 20 feet away and make that dog release the object. So when I go for it, there's no tension, right? So I can safely move through aggressive behaviors without putting the client at risk, okay? And without creating confrontation. Not that confrontation is bad, but in certain scenarios, you know, this is how people get bit, okay? So, so like, let's say for instance, you have Jane with the little dog again, and maybe Jane found something, right? And you see the little dog approaching and you're like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I want to be proactive here because maybe if you step in, right? Because what can also happen, I've seen this before where something's about to happen and the owner jumps in and they're so frantic when jumping in, they actually create something, okay? As that I can just boom on the collar, remote her and make her just leave the object while being 20 feet away and avoiding something from happening. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So it gives you the most kind of gray area in terms of control and stuff. And it's super simple. It's very easy. Because of COVID now, like things have changed a lot, obviously. I've been doing, for the most part, purely verbal instruction. So I don't even need to touch the dog anymore. I just coach the owner. Okay. Which is why we've begun recording things because it is a lot of information.
Right.
So like if the owner forgets something, they just go to our YouTube channel and they find their video and they can watch their specific video on what they forgot. It's helped a lot of couples settle arguments.
Yeah.
If I have a, you know, if you're struggling with something and I have another client who had the same issue that we were able to kind of address it, I could just forward you the video and say, here, watch this. This is the same problem you're having. So it's a nice little database of resources for people. And you get the off-leash level of control, okay? E-collar is not electrocution. You're not shocking your dog. That's what, you know, the positive reinforcement world wants you to think. They want you to think that you're torturing your dog or that you're electrocuting them. It's a lie. That's not what the technology is. They actually use the technology on people. Okay. So have you ever seen like those videos where they recreate labor contraction pains in men?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously labor contractions, not pleasant, right? Very painful. So the machine that they're using is what's called a TENS unit. Okay. TENS, you can actually buy them from Walgreens now. If you go to like the back section, it looks like a little bone and you put on your lower back and it's a slight current that moves your muscles. Okay. It's muscle contraction. So in those videos with the labor contractions, it's obviously set very high because they're trying to create labor contraction level contractions, right? So that's all it is. It's a muscle stimulator. So the dog only feels it where the two probes are. So if the probe's on its neck, the dog's only going to feel it right here. So if you were to put it on your hand and you press the button, you would only feel it here. You would not feel anything anywhere else because, again, it's not electricity. Okay. So it's electric, but not electricity is how I explain it. And once the sensation is gone, it's over with. There's no like residual, like, you know, weird feeling or tingly feeling because you're not electrocuting your dog. The reason why it is so effective is because dogs are physical animals. Dogs bite each other and they don't give each other treats and they don't praise each other. They don't give each other CBD or anything like that to help settle the anxiety. They simply just bite each other. Okay. So think of the e-collar as a bite on a button. That's all it is. Okay. Now, we can use this bite on the button to, of course, shape things. This is how we shape all the obedience, the sit, the stay, the down, the come, the place, all that stuff. We shape it using the e-collar. But it's also great for stopping things, right? So like, oh, like I don't like the situation that might happen. Let me just correct her and get her to remove herself from the situation because I'm 40 feet away and I can't get there in time. Does that make sense? So so they use TENS units in muscle rehabilitation therapy. They use it at chiropractic offices. They use it at physical therapists. is if you were to go somewhere to have that done to you, they start low and they work their way up. Okay. When they get to a point that's too uncomfortable, they would tell you to tell them, and you go, oh, right there, that's about as much as I can take. They'll go, okay, and they'll lower it. And they'll say, how does that feel? And you'll say, oh, that feels just fine. And they'll go, okay, we're gonna let the machine do its work. It's the same thing with training. We start low, we work our way up. Okay. I don't know what Jane's number is gonna be. Jane will know. Personality type and temperament has nothing to do with the level. You know, I get dogs that are super timid or very, very sweet, you know, very loving dog, very high number. Because people are they're thinking, oh, my dog is so lovey, they couldn't be physically tough. And I go, they have nothing to do with each other, right? Because dogs bite each other. They're naturally physically resilient. Now, I do get dogs that are, yes, very sensitive and will have a very low number, but it's super rare. I get like maybe a handful of dogs a year out of, you know, a couple of hundred that I train a year that are that sensitive. I have had at least 8 dogs since, you know, COVID happened, whose numbers were very high, just normally, like their number was 85 or 95 out of 127, to give you kind of a context. That's super high. Those are outliers. Almost all of them, pit bulls, bulldogs, or bully type breeds. So that's one thing to keep in mind, because since people are logical, they start to feel uncomfortable when they get into those higher ranges because they think that they're hurting their dog. But I look at their dog and I'm like, but your dog's not like even doing anything. You know, like your dog's not yelping in discomfort. So clearly, you know, 60 out of 127 isn't doing anything. Okay. Questions so far about that?
Nope.
One of the most common questions that I get is, when does the e-collar go away?
Yeah.
In my book, when you need it, it doesn't. Okay. So what this means is, if you take her out for a walk and you're going to be out for a while, maybe you're going to go to the park, she's going to be off leash and all that, you're going to want to have it. Okay. It's not that you're always using it. It's just that it's present. Okay. So dogs aren't dumb. You know, they do learn, like when like training collars are on or whatever, and they behave better, right? Or if you have treats, like all of a sudden they're doing things, right? Because there's an incentive, whether it's positive or negative, there's some kind of incentive. Okay. This has nothing to do with my methods. It has nothing to do with my skills as a trainer. This is simply the way of the world. Do you drive?
Yes.
Do you go on the expressway?
Yes.
Do you go the speed limit?
Yes.
Okay, so you're a rule follower. Would you say other people go the speed limit?
Sometimes no.
I would think most of the time no.
Yeah.
Most people speed, right? So if it's a 60 miles per hour, they're usually doing about 65 to 70, right? It's the most common thing that people press and like, you know, quote unquote, disobey.
Yeah.
Unless they see a cop car. And then what happens?
Then they slow down.
Everybody slows down, right?
Yeah.
Because now there's an aversive, now there's an authority figure, now there's a potential of consequence. So then everybody all of a sudden remembers, oh, you know, I can get a speeding ticket. I'm going to go the speed limit. But once they pass the cop, all of a sudden everybody starts speeding again.
Right.
Okay. So that's called opportunistic behavior. So think of the e-collar as a cop on a collar. When she has it on, she's going to know, like, oh, mom has more control. So I'm going to obey the rules and stuff. And then as soon as you remove it, all of a sudden she like acts like she may have forgotten everything. And it's not going to be like, how do you say, like, and this depends on how well you reinforce it, like drastic, where it's like she's going to listen and not listen. Okay. Without it, she'll listen much better, but it's not going to be the same as if she were to have it present.
Right.
Okay. Let's say when people come over, because that's a stimuli, that's something out of her norm. She's most likely going to be very excited in the beginning. You may have that collar on to give you the means of stopping or controlling her behavior, to get her to relax. And then once everything's said and done and your guests are there, you can remove it because you no longer need it anymore. Okay. Maybe when your nephew is around, you have it on just in case. You know, Or like when the older dog is around, again, just in case. It's not that you're doing anything with it, it's just present just in case a situation would arise that you're going to need to have control.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Questions about any of that?
Nope.
How big is she?
She's like 45 pounds.
What kind of dog again?
I don't really know. Paws said she's part Rottweiler, but I feel like she is too small, but she's like kind of stocky, like like strong. And I think I saw a dog called a Smalland Hound, and she looks more like that.
Okay.
Those dogs get confused with Rottweilers, apparently.
Gotcha. Does she have a short coat then?
Yeah. Yeah. Here, I can bring her over. She's just laying on the couch. Jane, come here. Come here. This is Jane.
Okay. Very interesting. I don't see where they would get rot from. I mean, I kind of see it with the brown colorings, but it's a light brown. And like the shape of the head, none of that for me says rot.
I agree. My uncle had a rot and she doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see it. Okay.
Yeah, me either.
So for the collar, the one that you technically have two options. And then Maria will send you this information as well. One is the Dogtra 2300. That one's meant for dogs under 70 pounds. It's fully waterproof, 3/4 mile range, so plenty of range for the average family pet. And the other one is the Dogtra 1900S Black, which is a little bit more money. The only reason why I suggest that one, it is a sleeker model, whereas the 2300 is a box, which you might see, which is most common, and this one's more of a curved box. Okay, so people sometimes they just like the curve of it, so it's not so bulky on their dog's neck.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the highest powered collar, which simply means that your number would be lower on that model than it would be on the other model, because the other model is lower output. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So technically both options, they run between the 2300 is about 287-ish with tax. The other one I think is 325-ish with tax. Okay. I've had mine for going on 8 years, if not longer now, with no issues. So they're pricey, but they do last a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
The most common thing that I come across is the battery does die because it's a rechargeable lithium battery, much like your cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case, you'd simply go on, the website, you'd order a new one for $20. You can literally just open it up with the screwdriver, pop in the new battery, close back up again, and you're good as new. Okay. It does come with a 1-year warranty. So if anything pops up during that time frame, you can always send it in. You can, I believe on Amazon, you can even extend it to a 3-year warranty on some sellers. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you do move forward and you get your collar, what I suggest is that you read the manual and you fiddle with it. You don't need to do anything with your dog, but you want to mess with the remote. The remote goes in increments of 1 up to 127. Mm-hmm. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like that. If you notice when you're messing with the dial that it goes from like 1 to 35, like it just jumps, you have a lemon. You'll want to return that. Exchange it for a new one, okay? Because it shouldn't do that. It should be fairly simple. It can be a little sensitive on some of them, where it'll just escalate pretty quick, but it shouldn't be that drastic, okay? Mm-hmm. So that this way, you don't show up the training with the lemon and then, I mean, we could do the lesson because I have collars, but then you're stuck without your collar for now like 2 weeks and you just kind of wasted the class essentially. Mm-hmm. So I always say to test it out first. So this way, if you do get a lemon, you can just tell us, we'll push back, give you time to get your collar back and then start your training process, okay? At minimum, 6 classes. Again, we would just focus on the bare bones. And then the longest, if you're wanting full off-leash reliability, is the 12-week program. Um, the way my schedule works is if you have a consistent schedule, Maria would work with you, and then she would say like, what's your availability? She would look at our calendars and say, this time works, these times work for everybody. You would pick one of those times. And then you're given priority over that time frame for the length of classes plus one. So if you do a 6-week program for 7 weeks, that's your time. No one can take it from you. Okay. If you travel or go out of town or something happens and you have to postpone or reschedule, and we hit 7 weeks and maybe you have 3 classes left over, and maybe it's a Saturday afternoon. Saturdays and Sundays and evenings are my busiest times because most people are 9 to 5. So it's a very high demand time frame that Maria will tell you like, hey, you've used up your priority. You still have 3 classes, but we have another client that needs that time. So we have to book them. These are other times that Jessie is now available. And then you just choose a new time, and then she'd move you there, and then you'd finish up your classes. Okay. So same thing for like the 12-week program or 9-week. If you did 9, it'd be 10. If you did 12, it'd be 13 weeks. That's your time. No one's going to take it from you. Okay. Other than that, we have 2 places to work from. We work with clients either at Oz Park, which, you know, winter's coming. So a lot of people have been just meeting here at my facility. It's a 13,000 square foot training facility. My training space is like 5,000 square feet. So plenty of space to do like recall work, work on leash walking. You know, we can even work with like your nephew and all that stuff if you want to kind of do all that stuff in person. So we have plenty of space to do that here. No biggie. Everything again is for the most part through verbal instruction. I coach you through everything. The first class is always the hardest, but once you get over the first class, everything else is fairly straightforward. If you want to know what training looks like, you just go to my YouTube channel, look up any lesson 1. I think that's always a good one to watch because no one really knows what they're doing but me. So you can see just how effective it is, how straightforward it is. I also have a playlist called, I think it's Client or Dog Training Highlights, where I've just worked with cases and I kind of chop them up and break them down and I talk about them to kind of give a more in-depth and shorter explanation as opposed to watching like 3 hours worth of video, you know? So if you want to get a feel for it, you know, you're more than welcome to watch that stuff. That's what it's there for. Other than that, I don't really think this is going to be a problem. I think your dog's just overstimulated and COVID has caused some things to kind of turn on its head. And I think with a bit of discipline, she should straighten out.
Are there things I can do like in like a downtime, like, you know, when we're not focused on training that could help her with the overstimulation?
Honestly, it's just it's really just discipline. It's her. So like if she were to be like acting a fool, right? And another dog decided that behavior was unacceptable, they would just bite her. And she would learn, when I'm around this dog, I don't do these things because I don't want to get bit. It's very simple, you know, which is why the leash walking is so important because it's something that you do on a regular basis, right? Almost everybody here in Chicago walks their dogs. So that's why it's so important because it's something that you practice regularly that's discipline related. So that when you go back into the home, it's just keeping it in her mind that there's consequences and standards. And that's what helps keeps her settled. So it's not like you do the training and then do nothing and everything's hunky-dory. Like it's a lifestyle. But it's easy because it's just something that you do as you go about your day. So, okay. Other questions?
I think that was really it. Yeah, I mean, I talked to her vet when, like, over the summer, and she said that she was like bored and needed things to do.
No.
So no. Okay.
No. So that's a very common thing.
Yeah.
You know, so yes, dogs can get bored. But let's say with me as a kid, if I got bored in the house, didn't mean I could break my mom's things.
Right.
Because if I did that, what would happen? Spanked.
Right.
Right. She's like, you're bored? All right, we'll deal with it because you're not going to break things. You're not going to be destructive. Right. So, but people excuse dogs' behaviors. Okay. So it's very simple. I'm not saying to not walk your dog. I'm not saying to not give your dog puzzles.
Right.
But what happens is people keep feeding into these things like my dog is bored. They need more stuff. They need more stuff. And again, the dog doesn't learn to shut down because it's constantly like I'm being stimulated by all these new things. This food puzzle, the sniff mat, you know, barking out the window at dogs that pass by, you know, running around at daycare all day. That's why my daycare, it's structured. We don't do play all day. There's structured play where we correct things. We don't let things go over the top so we don't get dog bites or whatever.
Mhm.
We have treadmill time, so it's a nice focused exercise where they're having to just, you know, walk on the treadmill for 30 minutes or whatever the time frame is. During the summers, we did pack walks where we'd have like 6 to 8 dogs per handler going on nice long walks, and everybody was in formation. They're not pulling us all over the place. So it was exercise, but it was controlled exercise. So the brain had to turn off and focus on something else, you know. And then we do duration work as well, which is where the dog will be like on a dog bed, and they won't move for a couple of hours between play and treadmill time because that's mental exercise. That's, hey, go here and don't move until we give you permission to.
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas most places, it's just here you go, play all day, and then it leads to overstimulation issues.
Okay.
So it's really just discipline, in my opinion. Once things get started, that's going to be the real tell, you know. And so if you're like after class 1, you're like, man, Jesse, she's like toned down so much. Well, yep, it's exactly what I expected.
Okay.
Okay. I have my next client is here. It was a pleasure, Carly. If you have any questions, you can let us know. Otherwise, Maria will be in contact with you, and then she'll handle all the scheduling stuff from here. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.